Welcome to the deep dive. Wow, you've sent us a lot of stuff this time. Biology notes, textbook chapters, all sorts of things.
Yeah, it looks like someone's really diving deep into the science of life.
It does, doesn't it? And from what we can see, you want to understand how scientists organize all the different life forms on Earth, right?
You're talking about biodiversity, right? It's really pretty amazing when you think about the sheer number of different species.
I know. Millions upon millions. In fact, the source material we have here mentions that scientists have already identified like 1.7 to 1.8 million different species.
It's mind-blowing, and we're still discovering new species all the time.
That's incredible. It really shows just how much we still have to learn about life on our own planet.
It does. And, that brings up an interesting point. How do scientists even begin to make sense of all that diversity?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's got to be like, I don't know, imagine trying to organize a library with millions of books, but no Dewey Decimal System.
Haha, I love that analogy. And you're right, it would be total chaos. But luckily, that's where taxonomy comes in.
Taxonomy. So that's like the Dewey Decimal System for the living world.
Exactly. It's the science of identifying, naming, and grouping organisms based on shared characteristics. It's how we make sense of the incredible tapestry of life and understand how everything is connected.
Oh, I see. That makes a lot more sense. Imagine trying to talk about plants and animals without a system like that.
Oh, it would be a mess. Total confusion. We'd all be talking past each other.
Right. So taxonomy provides this common language then.
Exactly. It allows scientists all around the world to communicate and collaborate, making sure everyone is on the same page when discussing different life forms.
So how does this whole classification system actually work? Is there like a ranking system or something?
There is. It's called the taxonomic hierarchy, and it's basically a series of nested categories, each one getting more and more specific.
Nested. What does it mean?
Well, it's like those Russian nesting dolls, where you open one doll and there's a smaller doll inside and then another one inside that.
Ah, right. I got it.
So the main levels of this hierarchy are kingdom, phylum or division for plants, then class, order, family, genus, and finally species.
Wow. That's quite a hierarchy. So can you give us an example of how this all works?
Of course.
Hmm?
Let's take humans as an example. We belong to the species sapiens.
Sapiens, like Homo sapiens.
That's right. So Homo is the genus, and then the family is Hominidae, the order is primates, the class is Mammalia, the phylum is Chordata, and finally the kingdom is Animalia. It's like each level tells us a little bit more about where an organism fits into the grand scheme of life.
So it's all about relationships then.
Exactly. And your source material actually uses another great example to illustrate how this works, the mango.
Oh, the mango. Love those.
Right. Well, its scientific name is Mangifera indica. So like with humans, Mangifera is the genus, and indica is the specific epithet.
So every species gets its own unique two-part name, like a first and last name. That's what binomial nomenclature is, right?
Exactly. And it's really helpful for scientists because it gets rid of any confusion when we talk about specific organisms. No matter where you are in the world, a Mangifera indica is a Mangifera indica.
No room for arguments there.
Exactly. But, scientists haven't always classified life this way.
Oh, really?
Hmm.
How did they do it way back when?
Well, early classification systems like the one Aristotle came up with were often based on really simple characteristics like whether something was a plant or an animal.
All right, so plants were generally rooted and animals moved around, right?
Yeah, exactly. They didn't really look beyond those obvious features. And a lot of it, honestly, was kind of anthropocentric, meaning it was very much about how these organisms related to us humans.
Interesting.
But as our understanding of life expanded, especially when we started looking at microscopic life forms, things got a lot more complicated.
Right, because once you start looking at bacteria and fungi, they don't really fit into those neat little boxes of plants and animals, do they?
Not at all. The old system just wasn't cutting it anymore. Scientists needed a way to account for all these incredibly diverse life forms, and that's what led to some really big changes in taxonomy. Like, in the 1960s, Robert Whittaker proposed this five-kingdom system.
Five kingdoms. Wait, so we added three more kingdoms to the mix.
Yeah, because Whittaker realized that bacteria, like they were so different from plants and animals that they needed their own kingdom, so he called it Monera. And then fungi, those amazing decomposers that don't really fit in with plants, they got their own kingdom too.
That makes sense. But even with five kingdoms, I'm thinking about all those microscopic life forms. The ones that are neither plants nor animals, nor bacteria or fungi, like those single-celled organisms. Where do they fit in?
Ah, you're talking about protists, right?
Protists, yeah. That always seemed kind of mysterious to me.
Well, they are pretty incredible. Just imagine like a giant grab bag filled with all sorts of single-celled eukaryotic organisms. Amoebas, algae, slime molds, you name it.
So it's like the miscellaneous category of life, the island of misfit organisms.
Haha, you could say that. They're incredibly diverse, and classifying them is a real challenge for taxonomists.
I bet. I mean, some of them seem more like plants, others seem more like animals.
Exactly. And some even have connections to fungi. It's like figuring out where they belong on the tree of life is this ongoing puzzle.
So where does that leave us with the big picture of taxonomy? I mean, are we going to keep adding more kingdoms as we discover more and more about life? Or is there a different way to think about it all?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. With the advances in molecular biology and genetics, we've learned so much about how organisms are related to each other at a really deep level. We're not just looking at what they look like anymore, we're looking at their DNA and RNA, their genetic blueprint.
So it's like we've gone from just reading the cover of the book
Yeah.
to actually understanding the language inside.
Exactly. And these molecular tools have allowed us to create these like new and even more comprehensive systems of classification. One example is the three-domain system.
3 domains. Now, hold on a minute. Are kingdoms going out of style now?
No, kingdoms still have their place. The three-domain system just provides an even bigger framework. It recognizes three primary branches of life: bacteria, archaea, and eukarya.
Okay, break that down for me. What are these domains all about?
So bacteria, that one's pretty straightforward. It includes all the bacteria we know and love. But then there's archaea, which is kind of mind-blowing.
What's so special about archaea?
Well, it includes all these single-celled organisms called extremophiles. They live in all sorts of extreme environments, like boiling hot springs and super salty lakes, places where you wouldn't think anything could survive.
Wow, so they're like the ultimate survivors.
They really are, and they're so different from bacteria that scientists had to create a whole new domain for them. It really changes how we think about what life even is. And then, of course, there's eukarya.
Eukarya, right?
Yeah.
And that includes us, right?
Yep, animals, plants, fungi, protists. They all belong to the domain eukarya. So you see, it's like we're adding layers of detail to a map, revealing more and more about the intricate pathways of evolution.
It's like zooming in and out of the tree of life.
Exactly. But even the three-domain system isn't necessarily the final word.
You're telling me there's more.
You know it. It's a model, just like any scientific model, and it's going to keep changing as we get more information.
So it's more about the journey than the destination.
Absolutely. We're constantly learning and refining our understanding of life, and that's the beauty of science. It never stands still.
So for our listener who's really diving deep into all this biology, where do they even start? I mean, we've covered so much, from ancient classification systems to these extremophiles.
Well, I think the key is to start with the basics. Understand the hierarchy, the two-name system, and what makes each major group of organisms unique. Once you have that foundation, you can explore the incredible diversity of life with a new sense of wonder.
It's like having a key to unlock a whole new world of understanding.
Exactly. And once you have that key, you never know what amazing discoveries you'll make.
You know, as we were talking, I was reminded of this quote from our source material. It's by Ernst Mayr, the evolutionary biologist. And he said, "How wonderful is the living world. The ecological conflict and cooperation among members of a population make us deeply reflect on what indeed is life."
Wow, that's a great quote. And it really highlights why taxonomy is so important. It's not just about memorizing names and categories.
It's more about the bigger picture.
Exactly. It's about understanding those connections and relationships between different organisms.
It's like once you see the patterns, the whole world just kind of comes alive in a new way.
I know exactly what you mean. It makes you realize that we humans are just one small piece of this amazing tapestry of life.
Right. So for our listener who sent us all this biology stuff, let's do a quick recap of what we've learned in this deep dive. We started with the basics of taxonomy, right?
Right. We talked about how scientists identify, name, and classify all those millions of species on Earth. We covered a lot of ground.
We did. We talked about that whole hierarchy thing, from kingdoms all the way down to species, and how that system has changed over time.
Yeah. Like how we went from 2 kingdoms to 5 kingdoms and then to the 3 domains.
And we can't forget about binomial nomenclature, that two-name system that gives every species its own unique scientific name.
Right. Like a universal language for scientists.
Like a passport for the natural world.
Yeah.
So cool. But I think one of the biggest takeaways from all this is that taxonomy is a constantly evolving field.
Oh, absolutely. It's dynamic, always changing as we make new discoveries and develop new technologies. I mean, who knows what we'll discover next, right?
Exactly. We even touched on those extremophiles, those organisms that live in the most extreme environments.
Like boiling hot springs and acidic lakes.
I know. It's amazing to think that life can exist in those places.
Yeah.
Really makes you appreciate the diversity of life on Earth.
It really does. But we don't want to just leave our listener with a bunch of information. We want to leave them with a question to ponder, something to spark their curiosity and make them want to explore more.
That's a great idea. So here's something to think about. Now that you have a basic understanding of taxonomy, what questions do you have about specific organisms or where they fit into the tree of life? What piques your interest?
Maybe you're curious about the evolutionary history of your favorite animal, or maybe you want to learn more about the plants in your backyard. Whatever it is, remember that the world of taxonomy is full of fascinating discoveries waiting to be made.
Exactly. So keep exploring, keep asking questions, and most importantly, keep being amazed by the incredible diversity of life on our planet.
Well said. There's always something new to learn.
That's so true. And that's what makes it so exciting. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of taxonomy. We'll see you next time for another exciting journey of exploration and discovery.